Initially, I was hesitant in making this video. A defense like this automatically puts me in a precarious situation, as all people could do is dig through avalanches of content, find individual pieces of information or analysis that I disagree with, and force me to defend the statements in question. So, I would like to start by saying that I don't agree with 100% of what Critical Drinker has to say. For example, I heavily disagree with his Blade Runner 2049 review, a film that I love immensely and one that I return to quite often. Not only would I disagree with his conclusion, but around several statements he makes through the course of his review. Disagreements over film and TV are natural. I've yet to find a critic/YouTuber that I 100% agree with. Well, I have actually, it's me. However, the claims we will discuss today go beyond that. We're not talking about a singular bad review or even faulty analysis. The video in question poses the Critical Drinker as a poor, idiotic liar propagandist who is interested more in siphoning people to his brand of politics rather than someone just giving his opinion on film and television. In my attempt to be fair, I will state outright that Birdman has valid points in the video that I agree with. Simultaneously, he makes some truly mind-boggling points that are downright farcical, creating standards so far and above what almost anybody else is doing on this platform just to dunk on the Critical Drinker. I can only assume that somewhere down the line his hatred for this Scotsman reached such high levels that he was willing to trot out arguments so riddled with holes, even Quagmire couldn't keep up.
Ting tang, walla walla bing bang.
I'm not going over the full video, only the relevant parts, so for the full context, I suggest you watch the original video. Link is in the description below.
While the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bathrobe who for some reason keeps taking his baby along on life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home to look after it.
Next issue you might see is the claim that Peter is being irresponsible by bringing his daughter on, and I quote, life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home. Again, if you've watched this movie, you'd know that Peter's presence in the film was entirely to be a familiar face for Miles and to help him accept his canon event, not go on a life-threatening adventure.
You're the reason I had her, okay? I thought that if I did a decent job raising her, that there was a chance she was gonna turn out like you. And that got me excited because you are a wonderful person, and I like being around you.
Moreover, May Parker has superpowers, and her dad would likely be the only one in the relationship physically capable of corralling the clearly energetic child. What's more is he brought her to probably the safest environment she could possibly be, a hub with a million other superheroes.
In regards to the child, this is wrong. The film at multiple points addresses the fact that this was an irresponsible decision by Peter. He lies to MJ about his actions, which he would not have to do if he took the correct course of action. The end of the film also shows that he will be bringing the child to another universe besides the Spider-Man hub, most likely where conflict will take place.
Peter, did you bring our baby to another fight?
Did I bring our baby? No. Because you asked me not to, so I didn't. I wouldn't. Don't tell Mom.
Friends.
You can grant the drinker some things, you don't have to contest every point.
Also, I can't shake the feeling that the script is doing everything in its power to play down Peter Parker, like it's afraid the audience will somehow start rooting for him over Miles if he's shown to be too capable and confident. The first movie portrayed him as an aging, burned out loser who only redeems himself at the end, while the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bath. Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
Thing you'll notice if you've seen that movie is that he's just blatantly incorrect. Peter B. Parker is not the only straight white male in the film. In fact, there are many of them, quite a few of them variants of Peter Parker himself. More importantly, there is a prominent supporting character that is the motivation for Spider-Gwen's entire arc in the film, Captain Stacy. The less obvious observation is that Will is a race baiter. The Spider-Verse films, while featuring a black protagonist, do not contain the themes of race relations. The more astute of you will then ask, well, why even bring that up at all? And therein lies the problem. Will's goal with many of his film reviews is to galvanize his mostly male, mostly white, and mostly straight audience around the idea that they are being attacked for being those three things.
Moving on to the more substantive point about the drinker injecting race where it does not belong, I agree with Birdman here. I don't believe the film is making any sort of point, and if I had to guess, this is bringing the Peter versus Miles debate into the film when the film is not about that in particular. I don't think it's particularly effective to analyze the various characters' identities in relation to what side of the conflict they are on and attempt to extrapolate a larger message from there. unless the film deals with this or it's seen within the subtext. Unfortunately, although I am not a fan of this mode of analysis, it has become pervasive through modern media discourse. The Slash Filmcast is a film podcast that covers most films. In general, you could roughly say that they lean the opposite side to the critical drinker. I do my best to listen to a variety of perspectives. In their review of The Gentleman, the 2019 film directed by Guy Ritchie starring Matthew McConaughey, they go on to use a similar mode of analysis that we saw the drinker use.
Yeah, so I feel mixed about this movie. Like when we talk about problematic movies, I feel like this one is particularly because I really, really enjoy like 75% of this movie. There's so much of this I love. And then this movie does some random stuff where it's just like, oh, let's just be very racist to Asian people for some reason, for no reason, to make the worst, the dumbest, like 90s jokes about the name PHUC. You know, it's like, I first of all, I heard this in school when people were shitty at school. I heard this in many TV shows and many like movies in the 90s and the aughts. Like, it does feel like if you're gonna do an insult, at least make it new. At least make something fresh. Like, give me something new here, Guy Ritchie.
His name was Fahok. It was spelled with a PH, so it sounds like Fahok.
Please!
All right, Fahok, Kanda Fahok.
Please!
And then Jeremy Strong, who I like how weird he is, but I also had the sense of like, is this performance anti-gay? I don't know. Like, is this all right? What he's doing? I don't know what's going on. It's very foppish in a very weird way that feels like it's almost making fun of, I don't know, people who talk like that, but I can't tell because it's Jeremy Strong and he can be good and invest himself in a crazy role like he did in Serenity. So I don't know.
Here's what I'll say about that topic. It's really not kind of my area of expertise, but from what I understand, there's a long history, particularly noticeable in Disney films, of coding villains as queer in some way, right? Like that. You think about like Jafar or Ursula from the Little Mermaid and so on. Like many of the villains in Disney films have been coded as queer in some respect. And
I like the comparison. Like we're gonna draw a diagram of Disney films to Guy Ritchie films.
Well, I mean, there's a heavy overlap after 2019.
There is now.
But and so there's a long history of that, and this movie feels like it's bringing like that has long gone out of style. But this movie feels like it's bringing that back along with Asian jokes.
It's certainly a choice.
It's really really baffling to me.
And he's not the only one in the. I mean, literally every character you're supposed to be happy, bad things happen to is
coded as queer in some way.
Hugh Grant is in this movie too, and is also doing that.
Because the villain happens to be gay, the three co-hosts go on to extrapolate from the film and talk about what the film is intentionally or unintentionally doing. Even though the plot of the film has nothing to do with sexual orientation, the fact that most of the characters in this world have their own idiosyncrasies, egos, and certain flamboyant aspects to many of the characters, the three hosts still found a way to worm in their own worldview into their review when the film itself has nothing to say about that. Is it really so wrong that the villain just happens to be gay? Not really. To be fair, this is a whataboutism. But I would ask, if you find the drinker's mode of analysis so egregious here, then one should logically maintain the same standard to the film cast. Because if you're upset with one and not the other, you're not actually upset at the method of analysis used. You are actually upset at the subject at the center of this analysis. And if that's the case, you're actually more upset about politics than anything else. Because you're actually fine with the analysis, you're only upset at the drinker for using the wrong subject at the center of his analysis, meaning you have a political gripe. You can object to the analysis without going on to fully condemn the reviewer. It's annoying that this type of analysis has grown in recent years. But this has more to do with an industry that has become obsessed with identity. Do I roll my eyes when the Filmcast brought this up? Sure. But do I believe that wholly disqualifies them as reviewers? No. Same for the drinker.
There seems to be a bit of a debate going on about whether or not this movie is woke, mainly because of the demographics of certain characters. And to be fair, there is a bit of evidence to support this claim. If I was a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men, but hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
Seriously. What the fuck does this movie have to do with race? He has straight white men in his mouth so often you'd think he was an escort. If he applied even a little of that gray matter, maybe he'd come to the conclusion that most rich people in our society tend to be white men. The Riddler was going after police officers and politicians, and again, in our society, they tend to be white.
To be more specific regarding this point, we would be more interested in taking a look at Gotham City, not the entire nation. and given that NYC is the rough equivalent, we actually see that the NYPD is a majority-minority police force.
What Drinker is asking for here is diversity, but only amongst the villains of the film. Moreover, what he's conveniently leaving out is Riddler also attempted to assassinate the mayor-elect, a black woman.
We saw one error, and now we move on to another one immediately. Just watching this video up till now, and this specific point, I can understand. From a broad perspective, this video seems to have many damning points for the Drinker. However, if you listen closely, it can often be anything but. Let's listen back to what critical drinkers said in the specific section Birdman took.
As a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men, but hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
The Drinker is talking about how the rich, corrupt scumbags Riddler targeted were all white men. Not that every single individual that the Riddler targeted was a straight white guy. The mayor-elect in question is supposed to be good. She provides the juxtaposition to the incumbent mayor, who is the rich, corrupt scumbag who Riddler targets at the beginning of the film. While he represents the corruption, the rot that possesses Gotham City, she is the arbiter of change, the hope the city needs to move in a new direction. Birdman is wrong here again. Additionally, the Drinker is not calling for diversity purely amongst the villains. If this was the case, he would advocate that the race swap characters be made white and then all the villains need to be diverse. However, the Drinker actually does not seem to mind.
As for race swapping certain characters, yes, that does indeed happen here, but I should probably point out that Billy D. Williams was playing Harvey Dent way back in 1989, and nobody seemed to give a shit about that.
A little convenient to leave out, no? It would seem that he is fine with a diverse cast of heroes and villains. This clip was right after the one Birdman played.
If all of this wasn't baffling enough, he himself states this film isn't about race.
And to be fair, Kravitz and Jeffrey Wright both do a great job with the roles they're given, and apart from one poorly judged line from Catwoman right at the end, race never really comes into the picture. So I guess what I'm saying here is that while the movie takes a few little stabs at modern day social issues, it really never dominates the narrative.
Does he even hear himself?
But the Drinker goes on to say that this is not an issue for him. I'm confused as to why this is even in the video. People often do this. They will bring up a narrative or a talking point, present the evidence for said argument, and go on to give their own take as to whether they agree or they do not. It's not so outside the bounds here.
Listen to this incredible leap in logic for Godzilla vs. Kong.
And oh look, Kong's been abducted from his homeland and taken across the ocean to America in chains. I mean, there's on-the-nose writing, and then there's next-level stuff like this. I wonder who you're supposed to sympathize with here.
Yes, Drinker just called African slaves apes and tried to frame it as the screenwriters doing so. That, my children, is what we in the English-speaking world call projection. And like almost every observation this guy makes, it's hilariously wrong. They're not even taking Kong to America. They're going to Antarctica in this scene. So not only did he get the scene wrong, he saw racial themes in a film where there are none because his brain immediately goes to black people when he sees an ape in chains.
I will be honest. Here, it seems like a joke more than anything else. If you're offended by it, there's not much I can do. This clip is also from a trailer reaction, so I doubt the Drinker knew that Kong was being taken to Antarctica.
Last video, I showed a tweet by Drinker that I thought made it painfully obvious what his positions on black people in the media were. What I didn't account for was the insane mental gymnastics people would perform in order to deny that his post was racist in nature. So here's a tweet from a different person. If you're unfamiliar, this person is Nick Fuentes, a proud white supremacist. Sounds contradictory, I know, what with being a Mexican and having a name like Fuentes while being a white supremacist, but no one ever said white supremacists were intelligent. The point is, doesn't this tweet seem to be placing emphasis on a specific character in the Minecraft movie? I mean, now that I've told you this person is a white supremacist, it's obvious what his issue is, isn't it? So I'll ask again. What do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was? Do you really believe he's this upset about Jason Momoa's character here? Hold that thought. We're just getting started.
This is a disingenuous point, but a tactic we see increasingly in recent times. If your individual statements are not enough for one to draw a conclusion, simply appeal to other people's statements and lump said individual with the worst, and simultaneously call any defense or appeal to other statements the "I have a black friend" argument. The tweet in question here is nowhere near enough to call the critical Drinker racist. The very fact that you have to pivot to somebody else's tweet in order to impugn the Drinker's character should already tell you enough. There's a reason that Birdman here has to essentially beg the question from the viewer multiple times.
So I'll ask again. What do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was?
Because if he had enough evidence, then he would not have to do this. He could just simply present his statements as is. And if you wish to use the Drinker's past statements to further reinforce your point on this tweet, then it's only logical that one could also use the drinker's past statements to defend him from such accusations. I mean, take Concord for example. Maybe you tweet out the collection of heroes on display and go on to call it cringe. But guess what? Some white supremacist asshole decided to focus in on the black character to make the obvious insinuation. So clearly you're racist. And guess what? You also happen to criticize race-swap characters before, so double racist. And when you appeal to past examples of praise, credit, consistent standards you have held for other characters in the past, well, that's simply the I have a black friend defense.
The tactics of grifters and their parrots is to attempt to maintain an air of plausible deniability so that when they are criticized for their bigotry, they can hide behind deflections. In my previous video, I brought up one of them, the "but Ripley from Alien" defense. In short, these people try to use examples that match or are similar to the identity of a group that they regularly target to pretend they are not prejudiced against that group. In political discourse, this is probably more well known as, "but I have black friends." We know that doesn't actually work as a defense because we have actual history of slave owners falling in love with their slaves and that male sexists still love their female family members.
Taking a deeper look into the video he mentioned, it contains even more errors. If you actually pause and analyze the material, you will quickly see what's wrong. Most of the examples of Billy D. Williams cites are people conflating him with Lando Calrissian and becoming upset with the actions his character took. That's why they said it should have been him in the ice.
Nearly everywhere I went, fans harangued me for portraying Han Solo. I got dirty looks on airplanes. How could you? A flight attendant scolded. At the grocery store, a man shopping with his teenage son looked at me with disgust. "I should put you in the deep freeze," he said, as his son nodded in agreement. The harshest reaction came on the playground at my daughter's school. In the afternoon, as I waited in the courtyard to pick her up, parents scowled at me. Then after the bell rang, I got the same treatment from Hanako's friends. "Mr. Williams, you sold out Han Solo. Why'd you do that? Now Han Solo's dead." It was laughable until it wasn't, until I sensed the black-white thing might be brewing. That's when I took a step back, put up my hands, and told people to wait a minute before they criticized me any further. I guess I had done a convincing job playing Lando as a dubious character.
Now, to be fair, he does say that he quote-unquote sensed a black and white thing going on. However, is this every individual who made comments like this towards him? I mean, it's retarded, sure, but unfortunately this still happens today. Actor Fabian Frankel left social media because people were conflating him with his character Kristen Cole in House the Dragon, attacking him for the decisions his character makes in the show. Unhinged people like this exist. This is not to say that Billy D. Williams received no racist hate, but some of these individuals are simply just stupid, but because the actor in general is receiving racial hatred, you can now lump everyone in the racist bubble, even those just being stupid. Imagine that you put out a tweet, "Rose Tico as the character sucks, the performance was bad, and I hope her character dies in the next film." Now, because the actress is simultaneously receiving racial hatred, you are now racist. Look at what this other guy said. He hated Rose Tico, and so do you. The natural conclusion is you're racist. Well, actually, no. Not only is the original statement in isolation not racist, because criticizing a character, the actor's performance, or wishing ill will to a specific fictional character is not racist, thus the accusation itself is ridiculous. Pivoting to other people's unhinged statements is not a valid argument. And if you wish to go through previous statements to come to a conclusion, then any honest actor must take the totality of statements, including counterexamples, to come to a conclusion in good faith, and not simply rely on the quote-unquote "I have a black friend" argument to dismiss any conflicting information, which is essentially what has happened here.
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big and burly, and she obviously knows what she's doing when it comes to the fight scenes, but she's a fucking cage fighter, not an actor. Watching her trying to emote is almost as painful as watching Brie Larson trying to be funny. Oh well, it could have been worse. They could have cast Ronda Rousey.
Pretty obvious he dislikes this person and thinks she shouldn't be an actor. Fair enough. However, later that year, Gina got into a string of spats on Twitter that had her facing accusations of racism and bigotry, and she was subsequently fired by Disney. Then, a few months later, Drinker makes a video about Gina so embarrassing, you just have to hear it to believe it.
Gather round, dear viewer, as I tell you a tale. It's the tale of a woman who stood tall in the face of jealousy, cowardice, hatred, and vengeance, and dared to utter a single word. No. It's the story of the girl who wouldn't back down. She fought and won many battles and earned herself great acclaim. But the young woman had her eyes set on a higher goal, and eventually she gave up her life of fighting, travelling instead to the great kingdom of Hollywood to seek fame and glory as an actor instead. And as it turns out, her long years of training and fighting served her well, and soon she was chosen for many roles on the silver screen. Her triumph was cemented when the king and queen chose her to play a soldier, fighting amongst the stars themselves. Her fame was growing fast, but sadly, so was her list of enemies.
This is a flip-flop so insane, It could put Crocs and Birkenstock out of business. And this isn't even the only video he's made about her. Listen to this nonsense.
One of the problems with hiring strong independent women to work at your company, instead of the usual assemblage of soft, entitled, like-minded corporate drones that have never had an original thought in their entire lives, is that they don't always think, say, or do the things that you want them to. Case in point, Gina Carano, a former women's MMA fighter turned actor who was brought in to play Cara Dune on The Mandalorian, and at first, all seemed well. The show was a success, and Carano's character soon became a fan favourite. Unfortunately, she began to ruffle feathers behind the scenes at Disney Lucasfilm by refusing to spout the same politically acceptable talking points as everyone else at the company, and even dared to express some conservative political views at times.
He spoke about this person like she was a dog, outright saying she can't even act, but as soon as she spouts nonsense and conspiracy theories and gets fired for her troubles, he's writing poems and puff pieces. This man is shameless. If it isn't obvious by now, he has a clear political agenda, and this colors his work. Before he knew she shared political opinions that align with his grift, she was a girl boss, only here to promote Kathleen Kennedy's woke agenda, and shouldn't have even been cast. But now, she's a shield he can use to deflect criticism about his obvious disdain for strong female characters.
Now, stay with me here, ladies and gentlemen. This is a complex thought. One can simultaneously think someone is bad at their job, yet also think that said individual was fired for the wrong reasons. I really like House of the Dragon. It just might be my favorite show currently airing. This actress in the show, however, sucks. Anytime this chick worms herself on screen, I dread it, I hate it. It's even worse given that every other single individual is knocking it out of the park, meaning she sticks out even more. I hope this character dies, or she takes some more acting classes to seriously up her game. Now, let's say that the actress in question comes out with an absolutely heinous, degenerate statement that Pepsi is superior to Coca-Cola. My fucking god. The outrage is instant. The angry mob is at the metaphorical gates, and HBO decides to fire her ass. Now, maybe, as a somewhat half-baked, principled individual, I can say that maybe it was unjust for her to be fired over such statements, even though this actress is so bad that picking somebody off the street is better. Hell, if I was one of the idiots who did like Pepsi more than Coke, I might be even more passionate in my defense of the actress. And to all the viewers out there who do like Pepsi more than Coke, there is still time to be saved, but I still love you. Now, for the purposes of this analogy, I chose subject matter that is less controversial than the tweets in question by Gina Carano. I think. But holding these two views is in no way contradictory. You might think someone is doing a bad job, but that maybe their statements that they have made are not enough for said individual to be fired justly. Listen, if you think the flowery language in the poem is cringe, fine. But to take issue with this is simply illogical. Whether it's within Disney's right to fire her is not the question, but do you believe it was justified? If in Gina Carano's case you do, I would simply ask how you would feel if an actor who is not good, but is fired for opinions you agree with. In this case, would you still not object? I think so.
Now, before I dive into this review properly, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work and genius PR campaign of the Warner Brothers marketing department. You guys really pulled off a miracle with this one, successfully duping all of us, including me, into believing that Barbie was going to be just another colourful, light-hearted, easygoing family comedy with some cheeky self-aware humour, ironic meta-gags, and probably capped off with a blandly inoffensive female empowerment message about girls learning the value of their own potential. What none of us expected was 114 minutes of spiteful, bitter, mean-spirited, borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016, and She-Hulk. It is pure brain cancer in movie form, and I was genuinely shocked by the sheer, undisguised contempt this film has towards 50% of the human population.
Besides the fact that this is one of the most hyperbolic, nonsensical summations of this movie, how could he have possibly come to that conclusion for the film's marketing? It was plainly obvious that Margot's Barbie was the main character and that she would face an existential crisis.
Do you guys ever think about dying?
On top of that, they show Barbie's feet going flat, suggesting that the film would be clearly feminist in nature, as feminists have been arguing against heels for decades. The marketing material also shows Barbie entering the real world and experiencing sexual assault, and I can only conclude that Drinker's media literacy is questionable at best.
This is an odd point. He goes on to say that critical Drinker's analysis of the film is terrible. However, then only addresses statements regarding the marketing of the film? To what degree you can read the film's politics by the trailer would seem to be the lesser issue compared to the actual analysis of the film. But taking a look at the trailer, I don't believe it's clear. Most of the examples are about an existential crisis of going from a fake world to reality. An existential crisis about what is real or not is not a direct link to feminism. He even says that in the clip, he expected an empowerment message in the film. However, he did not believe the marketing properly indicated how heavy-handed it would be in the film. Even the feet going flat was, to me, a further transition to the real world, because Barbie's feet are pretty unrealistic. And as for the one guy slapping her on the butt, I don't think it's clear to extrapolate that the entire film is about patriarchy and all those societal pressures and systems going into that from this one specific clip.
To belabor this point, he's been caught changing the titles of his videos after a media property releases to hide his terrible perception of marketing material. And
there is a whole backstory that goes behind the attitudes before and after House of the Dragon released. Before the show came out, many individuals were not excited at all, given the disastrous finale of the original Game of Thrones and the sour taste it left in one's mouth. The Drinker was one of these individuals, thus expressing his own ambivalence towards the show. He might have gone too far by taking his own feelings and mapping it onto the general audience, but he has since stated he was wrong.
Most of us confidently predicted it would come and go like a fart in the winds, including yours truly as it happens. But holy shit, I'm pleased to say that I was 100% wrong on this one. House of the Dragon is a fantastic show that recaptures the spirit of peak Game of Thrones with strong writing, competent world building, and a fantastic cast of characters played by talented and capable actors. In short, it's basically everything I didn't think it would be, and it's a neat little warning not to judge a show by its trailer.
As to the changing of the video title, that should not have been done. But watching the actual video, either title is not accurate to the content in question. Most of this clip is just the three individuals shitting on George R. R. Martin for not finishing A Song of Ice and Fire, and rather than a breakdown of the trailer, or why when it comes to the show, they do not care. This seems to be an error in just titling this video from the get-go. But there was not much in the way of analyzing marketing material.
And if all that wasn't enough to prove that Mr. Jordan has the integrity of a sandcastle, here's something that was brought to my attention. On one of Drinker's live streams, he attributed a false quote to Isabella Merced about the failure of Madame Web.
Some of the stars of the film have got theories about why that is, and one of them is right here. Isabella Merced? Is that the word? Merced?
Sure. Yeah.
She said it failed for one simple reason. For the same reason that the Marvels or Bird of Prey failed, because the male audience still hides a deep contempt for everything that is starring strong, independent women.
Oh, God. The truth is the truth, I guess.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely the reason Birds of Prey failed and the Marvels. It wasn't because they were bad films that no one wanted. For sure.
Isabella was, of course, inundated with hate from parrots that took these quotes at face value because why would grifters lie to them? She then had to come out and deny these clearly false allegations, but by then, the damage was already done. To date, there has been no update, no retraction, no public apology on Twitter from Will Jordan for spreading this quote, and that's because he has a vested interest in seeing the culture war proliferate in media discourse, as this is profitable for him. Even if he didn't know the quote was fake, this shows the lack of research and effort he puts into his work. No discernment, no ability to perform an investigation, and hastily attributes an obviously fake quote in a concerted effort to confirm his biases. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point? How can you trust he's done the homework?
Based off my research, this was a false quote attributed to Isabel, and it's truly unfortunate that she received hate for statements she did not make. What's happened here is that over the years, we have seen various statements like this from actresses, directors, and others complaining about men or some larger societal issues in relation to their own respective projects. Most of the time, these statements are dumb on their face. Critical Drinker has covered similar statements like this in the past. And, upon seeing the news, he took it at face value. Here, I will agree with Birdman that he made a mistake and should issue an apology.
This is not the first time he's been caught manipulating a narrative. The YouTuber Pillar of Garbage exposed Drinker for lying about scenes in Glass Onion because Drinker has a political gripe with Rian Johnson, the director of Glass Onion, and The Last Jedi, a film he and his ilk have pilloried for the past 7 years because of perceived wokeness. Here's a clip.
The example Drinky gives for Rian Johnson's blatant rewriting is the scene where Blanc and, as we later see, Helen spot Duke's voyeurism.
Batista's watching his girlfriend supposedly having an affair with Miles only to be observed by Blanc. Now look at the later version of this exact same scene. Notice how Helen's been added in here when she totally should have been visible before.
Except, no, that isn't true. There's a reason the Drinker plays these clips on mute. Let me put the sound back on for you. That was the first time we see this. There's a close shot of Duke, then we hear the twig snap, and then we pull back to a shot revealing Blanc. Here's the scene as we're shown it later on. We start with this slightly wider shot, revealing Blanc and Helen, then Helen leaves, causing that sound, and Duke turns round. This point is the moment we saw earlier on, and there's a very obvious, very obtrusive sound cue, the sole purpose of which is to communicate precisely this. Look, you can enjoy the way moments like this toy with the audience perspective, complementing the film's themes, these ideas of how we see and how we falsely composite and rationalize these perceptions away from the truth, away from what's really plainly shown to us, or you can dislike it. But what you can't do is lie about how the film constructs moments like these on a mechanical level. And that's what the Drinker does here to cap off his video, to build into this last point.
Why would Drinker do that? Is he incompetent, or is he a blatant liar? These are the only two choices you have, and both of them are damning for his reputation. And yet, he doesn't seem to care, because I guess his followers don't seem to care.
Is this a mistake of Drinker's? Yeah. Do I think it's a lie, made in bad faith, or important? No. The first issue is that the critical Drinker doesn't have a gripe with Rian Johnson due to politics. Okay, maybe it's part of it. But if you would categorize Drinker as a conservative, well then he would most likely have staunch disagreements with almost every director in Hollywood. The Drinker hates Rian Johnson specifically for taking a franchise he held dear, dousing it in gasoline, and then lighting that bitch on fire. Now, not only does the original video by Pillar of Garbage suck, what is a mistake here is recategorized as a blatant lie, and anybody operating with an ounce of good faith would understand what happened. The distinction between these two scenes is a twig snapping, a twig. Now these two separate scenes take place 55 minutes apart, almost an hour. Meaning that the Drinker forgot about the twig snapping, which is understandable because I myself missed this the first time watching the film. Like, oh, you missed the twig snap? Well, there goes your credibility as a critic. When discussing Drinker's video about this section, we encounter more lies. Anybody with a little editing experience should be able to figure out what happened here. The Drinker did not mute the clip in question. He is clearly talking over the visuals of the film here. What he has done is he has replaced the film's audio with his own voice recording to show his analysis over the relevant visuals in question, like I'm doing right now.
This scene where Batista's watching his girlfriend supposedly having an affair with Miles only to be observed by Blanc. Now look at the later version of this exact same scene. Notice how Helen's been added in here when she totally should have been visible before.
And if he didn't notice the twig snap, he would not have believed the audio to be an important factor. But yet Pillar of Garbage said that he purposely muted the audio. So either Pillar of Garbage is incompetent, or he doesn't know basic editing. At this point, the Drinker is so in this man's crosshairs that any mistake is an egregious error that wholly disqualifies him as a critic. Oh no, missed the twig snap audio cue? Well, literally go fuck yourself and never speak again. What? Additionally, this video by Pillar of Garbage is pretty bad. I recommend this Efap video for a full breakdown as to the many errors contained within the video.
Some incidental Last Jedi hate. Really
Is it incidental? It sounds like it's purposeful. It wouldn't be incidental.
Oh, no. To be fair, a lot of people don't know this. Rian Johnson actually made The Last Jedi. He's the director.
There's a link?
To be fair, he might not know this. So Rian Johnson made Glass Onion, and then a few years before he made Knives Out, and he famously, so I don't know how he missed this, made The Last Jedi before that. When you review someone's movies, you do often look at their, let's say, history. When I was reviewing Multiverse of Madness, I couldn't help but reference that Michael Waldron had been involved in Loki, because it was not only relevant narratively, but also just in terms of his past work and references to how good you can expect the work to be. You can say this is because he's obsessing about The Last Jedi, but I think that's better proven if you could find like a reference in every single video that has nothing to do with Rian Johnson.
Yeah, to establish like a pattern of creativity and part of his artistic,
well, but also apparently self-professed doesn't watch Drinker's videos, so like, yeah, how does he know that that's not the case?
It's just weird to me that
it seems obvious that you would reference Rian Johnson's other films in a review of Rian Johnson's film.
I feel like if you talk about Spielberg's latest movie and then you reference Jurassic Park, it's like, oh wow, 30 years ago, not letting that one go.
Yeah, let it go, mate.
A little obsessed already. And you know for a fact that someone was positively reviewing Glass Onion, and then they said, man, this was a great fucking movie, just like Knives Out and just like The Last Jedi. This guy's not gonna go, wow, that came out 2017, dude, still milking.
Yeah.
I mean, he publicly demonstrates that he can't keep up with basic logic all the time. Look at this tweet from Star Wars Holocron. They are very obviously making the point that sometimes a show's first season isn't always where it finally ends up, with a couple examples including The Clone Wars and Breaking Bad. When Will saw this, I mean, how do you fail at understanding the point this hard? This is one of two things. He either understands the point being made but is attempting to misrepresent the point to, again, galvanize an already volatile audience against a contentious product, thereby sending his parrots to harass this account, which actually fucking happened, or he doesn't understand the purpose of an analogy. Stupid people do this all the time. You'll say, well, fish swim and Olympic sprinters run, with the underlying logic being how they locomote, and the stupidest person you know will say, did you just compare a fish to an Olympian? And this is exactly why analogies are on IQ tests. But I'm willing to be charitable to Will and suggest it's the former, that he knows the point that's being made but is misrepresenting it to fit the narrative he's trying to push. I mean, the alternative is to suggest he's low IQ. And I would never do that.
Really? We have an issue with this? At this point, we have gone full bird brain. Most people would be able to immediately identify the problem with this tweet. In the attempt to dunk on the drinker, we are now defending blatant bullshit. Let's take a look at the tweet in question. Could we spot the issue here? Maybe. I know you might have to take a closer look. Let's read the following statement. Quote, "Take a look at Breaking Bad, one of the greatest shows ever, but it takes time to really grip you and needed more than one season to do that." The fuck? In what world does Breaking Bad start slow and not grip you in the first season? Breaking Bad is fire from the fucking jump. In fact, it has one of the highest rated pilots in television history. There are great moments in the show that come directly from season 1. The very premise of the show is what grips you. The idea of a down-and-out chemistry teacher resorting to cook methamphetamines in order to build a nest egg for his family once he is gone due to cancer. Is this premise not compelling from season 1? This is not to say that the first season is the best. Oftentimes, the first season is ranked last, so a more accurate statement could be that even the greatest shows of all time get even better with time. However, that is different from stating that the first season of Breaking Bad is not enough to grip you. Also, I can't tell if this is the way Birdman processed the tweet or he's just lying.
They are very obviously making the point that sometimes a show's first season isn't always where it finally ends up, with a couple examples including The Clone Wars and Breaking Bad.
That's not what the tweet says. His version is far more palatable because it's obvious on its face. Like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. If a show gets more episodes to tell its story, it won't end up in the same place, unless we're talking about the worst show of all time, or some sort of bare bones procedural. Because there will be more story with more content, aka more seasons, so by definition, it won't end up in the same place. The tweet is commenting on one's investment by the end of the first season, how engaged the viewer is, or how much one cares. That is different than where a show ends up further down the line. Let's use another analogy. Film franchises oftentimes need more than one film to grip you. Take a look at the Bourne franchise. Considered a great franchise, but the series did not grip you from the beginning. It needed more than one film to do so. It's sad that films such as Avatar: The Last Airbender were not given subsequent releases to develop the way the Bourne franchise did. Now, although I'm not directly comparing the quality of the Bourne identity to the live-action Avatar film, my analogy is wrong because it contains a false statement in its premise. That Bourne identity did not grip viewers from the beginning when it clearly did. The statement that subsequent Bourne films could be better is not the issue, like with Bourne Ultimatum. But anybody familiar with these properties would be able to spot the issue immediately. If in order to stand your shitty show, you have to besmirch the name of one of the greatest TV shows by stating the first season was not enough to grip people, I think some mockery is okay. If we want to be hyper anal, we could say that the drinker should have included season 1 in his tweet. But to take that and jump to insulting the drinker's IQ is a massive leap. This statement was fucking stupid, and most people would be able to immediately spot the issue.
In fact, you'll never see him talking about or promoting anything that's not mainstream unless it's an attempt at a narrative push. So yeah, he'll talk about Squid Game or Kingdom because they're mainstream, but do any of you believe he cares about Korean media at all? You know, because Korean women are probably some of the most feminist on earth, to the point that it heavily contributes to their birth rate decline and the swath of strong female protagonists that permeate Korean media properties? He has no idea, because he can only regurgitate talking points against what's in the mainstream, because you can't grift on things people don't know about.
Right. Okay, at this point we've just reached hysteria. What the hell is this point? Oh, the drinker only reviews mainstream South Korean film and TV? I doubt he cares. Because he probably doesn't know about South Korean feminist politics? Look, The Drinker reviewed RRR, more grifting on the mainstream. I doubt The Drinker actually knows about the historical, cultural, economic state of India and how it is shaped by waves of colonization which are now manifesting in religious tensions around the region regarding a uniform civil code, and how that maps onto India's economic aspirations to become a superpower by stopping brain drain, best illustrated through its advancements in space exploration, a la ISRO, and how this all culminates in the various film regions around the country during this polarized time. The fuck? Yeah, man, I think he can just review the movie. The Drinker reviewed Squid Games because it was the biggest show on Earth, and maybe he just enjoyed Kingdom so he reviewed it. Does he now have an obligation to delve into South Korean film and TV to prove he cares? Like, oh, The Drinker didn't review Cruel Winter Blues, what a grifter. How does this make sense? A little while ago, there was an international film released that was making waves in the action genre. The film was called The Raid. Now, The Raid is actually an Indonesian film, a market that we don't often hear about in the West. However, the film was so good that it gained international acclaim. Many consider the films to be some of the greatest action movies in the 21st century.
I'm gonna help. Best action movie made after the year 2001.
Raid 2. Raid 2.
Oh, I heard Raid 2 from Spencer first.
The Raid.
They're both after 2000.
Because of this, many YouTubers and critics reviewed the films. Now, did any of these reviewers end up deep diving into Indonesian film and television? From what I can find, no. They found a film they were interested in from a foreign market, reviewed it, and moved on. We all live in the quote-unquote Western English-speaking world, which is the market Critical Drinker would most likely interact with. However, once in a while, films break out from obscure markets that people can enjoy. Whether individuals choose to dive deeper or move on is up to them, and does not indicate one way or another if they're a grifter or not. By Birdman's standards, all of these individuals would be grifters. I mean, how much do these guys care about Indonesian film and TV? For example, you might see and review All Quiet on the Western Front. How much of an obligation do you now have to watch and review more German film and TV to not be a grifter? But The Drinker does not just review mainstream stuff, he has reviewed smaller indie projects. If you want to check out his second channel, this is where he often reviews older and more obscure films. What is odd is that Birdman should be aware of this already. He has pulled multiple clips and thumbnails from The Drinker's second channel, meaning that it is a fact he was seeing many of these reviews, yet he did not mention them in the video. This is where the Birdman straight up lies.
One of the reasons I started the Extra Shots series was to draw attention to older, more offbeat and inventive movies that perhaps didn't get the attention they deserved.
Deciding to purposely omit information contrary to his narrative about The Drinker. After spending this much time and effort calling out The Drinker as a liar, he ended up doing the same thing. This reminds me of when YMS claimed that The Drinker only reviews mainstream projects and later had to walk back his claims.
When I made this video, I was under the impression that like his recommendations were purely limited to the ones with recommends in the title. And then between, you messaging me and me being on this stream, I scrolled down the channel a bit, trying to see if I could maybe get in like one or two more videos before having this conversation. And I noticed that there's other videos where he's like recommending other films that are just not, I scrolled down the list using the search term recommends because I thought that that's how he categorized his videos, but there are a bunch more. And also, I will also say this. I read the title of Boiling Point, but I got it confused with the movie Hard Boiled. And Boiling Point is a lesser known movie that I haven't seen yet, but I would like to, But yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning of the stream, that was one of my misconceptions that I can easily give you a point on. He recommended a lot more things than what I scrolled through because it was categorized under a different title. Okay, so cool. I'm not going to try to argue that like he doesn't check out things that are against the grain or smaller films that aren't explicitly Disney films. That was a misconception on my part. So
like it's not untrue what he's saying, but it reflects like a very narrow media diet. It reflects a very narrow consumption of films, which is always like that's like most of the issue I have with like the types of reviews that the Critical Drinker makes are kind of like the types of reviews that like Ben Shapiro makes, where it's like you're subjecting yourself to like very few films in a year. Like, of course you're gonna be mad at them.
And that's when do you feel the same way about it, or did you say that you
No, I concede he exposes himself to more films than I previously thought.
At this point, we have lost the plot fully, resorting to call out The Drinker for not knowing enough South Korean entertainment while touting what non-mainstream South Korean media you're watching. fuck me.
This is why his review for season 4 of The Boys is what it is. He admits he hasn't even watched it, yet claims it has destroyed its audience, his source being the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
So, it was off to Rotten Tomatoes for me to check out the reviews. Not the critic reviews, of course, because nobody in their right mind gives a shit what those fucking shills have got to say about anything anymore. I'm talking about the audience reviews, which is the only semi-reliable barometer for quality these days, and oh.
Besides the fact that TV show reviews on Rotten Tomatoes aren't verified, meaning they are subject to review bombs, why doesn't he keep the same energy with, oh, I don't know, The Marvels, Black Widow, or Quantumania, movies that have pretty good audience scores? Seems like Drinker is the living embodiment of this meme, doesn't it?
This was not a review. I don't know where you got that from, as it's not in the title of the video. Nor does Drinker say anywhere in the video that he is reviewing Season 4 of The Boys. Is there a reason you didn't include the title, like you did with other examples? Either way, the reason Critical Drinker didn't rely on the Rotten Tomatoes scores for the examples you mentioned is that he did watch and review those films. So, when giving his own opinion, he won't appeal to others. However, in the Boys video, he was checking the Rotten Tomatoes score to give him an indication if he should continue with the show, as he was already checking out. When it comes to Rotten Tomatoes scores, I do understand that it's not the best metric, and many times people will only use the score when it reinforces one's point. But people do this all the time. If they consider something is bad and is negatively reviewed, well, then that's fine. However, the moment a show they like is negatively reviewed, now it becomes review bombing. Just like the Birdman slipped in.
Person does is not honest critique. He looks for ways he can jimmy in alt-right political talking points under the guise of being a movie reviewer. And I know his fan base doesn't want to believe that he is prejudiced against minority groups, but after everything you've seen here, if you're an honest person, you're at the very least asking questions. Why would he bring up conversations about race in films where that isn't the focus? Why would he lie and manipulate footage of a film made by a person that he politically disagrees with? Why is he spreading misinformation about a woman and attributing political positions to her? What does any of this have to do with film? This is because he's not a film reviewer. He's a political ideologue that complains almost exclusively about mainstream media to push rhetoric. And Will, I know you're watching, so let me finally address you directly. Film reviews are not your personal soapbox to air out your grievances with minority groups and those that advocate for them. It's irresponsible to your, my, and every other audience that consumes film and teaches them nothing about the art form. You create a hostile environment for neutral people that may stumble across your slop, where they may assume that film criticism is full of people like you. You do a disservice to the craft and give the rest of film YouTube a bad name. I think I speak on behalf of every reasonable film reviewer out there. Go away now.
With this, the Birdman summarizes the previous points in the video. After this, he goes on to directly address the Drinker, stating that film reviews are not his place to inject his views or air out grievances he has with demographics. That, quote-unquote neutral, film reviewers like himself and others develop a bad reputation due to his style of critique. It's very easy to brush in broad strokes and come away with this picture, but looking at specific examples, is it so outside the boundaries of reasonable discourse? Is it inherently wrong to discuss the selection of Star Wars' newest director and how her statements about being an activist would impact her work in the larger franchise? Or is this discussion only appropriate if you come to the conclusion that she will have a positive impact? Is it wrong to discuss gender politics in your Barbie review, when the film itself directly tackles said issues, where your view of the world will heavily influence how you see this film? Is it wrong to discuss the differences in approach that Peter Jackson took with Lord of the Rings versus Amazon with the Rings of Power, where making changes for the quote-unquote modern audience might be detrimental to the viewing experience and its quality? I would assume that the Birdman and others would be okay with these conversations so long as the conclusion is the one they agree with. If no, then you become a grifter, or you're not engaging with honest critique. The Critical Drinker is popular because he's a consistently funny reviewer who gives his take on media. The reviews and conversations surrounding media have become polarized in recent times, but these conversations should and need to happen, whether it be race bending, modernizing IP, gender swapping, mandatory diversity quotas, sensitivity readers, etc. These things are happening, practices and story decisions that are occurring in the current media landscape. As a reviewer, it's up to you as to how much you want to tackle these issues, but just because someone falls on the other side of this debate does not make them a dishonest reviewer. One can find plenty of critics and YouTubers who fall on the opposite side of Drinker and will themselves often bring up their own politics or simply give a good review for quote-unquote representation purposes. Sometimes employing similar styles of analysis like we saw with the film cast. Oftentimes these individuals are not labeled as grifters, because at the end of the day it's not actually about the mode of analysis that the Drinker employs. It's simply that he goes against the message.